Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name is Mike Aaron Hersterbaumer. I am a Senior Business Development Manager here with XTIVIA. First off, would just like to say thank you very much for everyone for joining this morning. We know everybody is busy, so we really appreciate you taking some time out of your Thursday to join us to learn a little bit more about us and one of our offerings here at XTIVIA. I will be joined by two of my colleagues that you see on the screen there, Paul Skirpsky and Mark Lahart, two of my good friends, colleagues, and longtime industry experts in the government contracting space. They'll jump in a few minutes, but just to quickly start, XTIVIA, if you're not aware, we are an IT solutions and services provider. While as an organization, I like to say that we really run the gamut when it comes to IT services. But for today's session, we are here to focus on our GovCon 365 app for Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. So before I pass it off to Mark, a couple of housekeeping items for today's webinar. First off, we will be recording today's session, so don't worry about trying to jot down a bunch of notes or worry that you're going to miss something. Once the webinar is done, we will be sharing out the recording with everybody later today as well. In addition, in the Zoom webinar menu, you should see a Q&A section. We'd love for this to be an interactive, dynamic conversation, so feel free to post your questions in that Q&A section. And if there is time allotted at the end of today, we will make sure to go through and get as many questions answered as we can. If we do happen to run out of time, we will make sure to follow up with everybody directly to make sure that we can get your questions answered later on. So with that, thank you very much again for joining. I'd now like to introduce you to my good buddy, Mark Lahart, who's going to tell you a little bit more about XTIVIA and our GovCon 365 solution.
All right. Thanks, Mike, and welcome everybody. So I'm just going to touch on a couple slides here. I don't want to PowerPoint you to death here, and then we're going to jump into the software. But just a little background here with XTIVIA. As Mike mentioned, we are an IT services organization. We are backed by a billion-dollar organization called Matrix. And our corporate headquarters is really based out of Colorado Springs. But the Microsoft practice is right here in Reston, Virginia. It is a 20-year-old business unit practice with XTIVIA, and we're right in the heart of government contracting. Next slide, Alex. All right, so as Mike mentioned, a couple of the areas that we focus on for organizations. We help companies with remote database administration support, integration developments. We have a couple of CRM offerings around Dynamic Sales and Salesforce and Monday.com. The center slide there, or column, is about the business solutions that we're going to spend some time in today, but we also offer some other areas and products that help people in ITSM support and service desk management. Next slide. Okay, so taking a look at this slide really sums up and wraps up how we're helping organizations today simplify their government contracting, right? We're helping their current technical environment become Microsoft-centric. And so if you look at the Business Central here, right in the dead center, it really is tightly integrated with some of the other Microsoft products that you're probably investing in here today. And that's where clients are taking advantage of this type of a total Microsoft environment. It's wrapped around what they call the Power Platform. It takes advantage of Power BI, which is an analytics, and maybe you're using that today as a reporting and analytics engine. And Power Automate is a workflow engine built into this. On the far right is something called accelerators or extensions from partners. So what XTIVIA has done after being in the area for 20 plus years, really recognized the need for some offerings to help government contractors. And we developed this accelerator called GovCon 365, which really wraps a lot of the government contracting requirements and functionality needed within Microsoft's Business Central. Next slide. Okay. So just a little background on Business Central. If you're not familiar with it, it is the most widely used mid-market ERP platform in the market here today. It has more clients than all our competitors combined, but it is Microsoft's leading product. A large share of their R&D investment goes back into this application and is growing at a rate of about 1,000 new clients monthly. Won't get into a lot of the details here, but I wanted to share with you the breadth of the product here as a complete ERP application for organizations. So whether your company is professional services only, or maybe you have services and you sell a product, or you manufacture a product, we can help clients that have those diverse business models manage all three of those types of requirements here within your application. It's also some functionality that maybe you don't need, but that's okay. It's part of the base solution. You don't have to implement everything. It's a mobile device here, so whether you're using an iPhone or Android, you can access the product remotely and as well as from a tablet. Okay, so as I mentioned, what XTIVIA has done is built GovCon 365. This is an app. It's been available and maintained and upgraded over the past 20 years. It's been approved by Microsoft and available on Microsoft's App Store. Just some of the highlights here, obviously, it does meet DCAA compliance. Standard Form 1408. It's based and supports companies' professional services. As I mentioned, companies who sell products, right, or manufacturing. And then a couple of these other areas that you would expect for it to be able to provide support for. But it's, lots of capabilities are built into this application. You'll see some of its rich features here today.
So over the next 35 minutes, well, actually the next 30 minutes, we're going to cover some capabilities. And then what we'll do is we'll leave some time at the end for a little Q&A. If you're interested in a full presentation, we'll also have all of our contact information and happy to give you a tailored presentation around the solution, and how it can meet your specific business challenges, because we want technology to help you to become more effective and efficient. So, areas that we're going to focus on in terms of the webinar are really around two things. One, what has Microsoft done to make government contracting easier? And then number two, what has XTIVIA done to make government contracting easier? So the first thing Microsoft has done is deliver an interface and capabilities that are streamlined and are familiar to people. I was just on a call with a government contractor about an hour ago, and one of the things they said is, we bought Microsoft because we know Microsoft. And that's the first thing that helps people to learn, is feel comfortable. The second thing that we've done is we've added capabilities like Mark talked about that cover standard government contracting requirements. And oftentimes, if you're not using an industry-specific product, you're doing these things online. So think about, managing your indirect rates and billing based on final rate if you have cost type work. Or, some of the unique invoicing formats or billing and revenue rules, right? So we've baked those into Business Central so you don't have to do things offline. The second Microsoft component Mark hit on, which is Power Platform and Office, how all of these things come together as one and help you to leverage and harness the power of Microsoft, with other exciting things coming, that people are talking about today. So areas that you might hear about right now buzz around Copilot, right? Or Fabric, which is the Microsoft business intelligence platform. So Copilot, think of AI. Fabric, think of dashboards and business intelligence. And then finally, as our CEO, Dennis Robinson, says, we're not anything without our people. And that's kind of our secret sauce. We have people that know government contracting. We live it. We breathe it every day. So I'm going to start off with a little bit around what does the interface look like. I talked about that streamlined interface and what helps people to be more efficient and effective. So I'm logged in as a government contractor into Dynamics 365. So what you see is every user gets assigned a role or a profile, and then you're also assigned security controls. So the role defines what I see when I log in, where security is going to determine read, write, modify, execute, delete permissions. We want to control data and only give it to people that should have access to that information. Whether it's good business practice, as well as you want those controls in place to make sure that you're compliant, from a processing point of view. As I look at the interface, the first thing you see is the top section. I call this the favorites area. So these are things that I get into on a regular basis. So my contract vehicles, we're going to talk about indirects later. But all of this can be personalized at the end user level or at the role level, and it can be done by you, the client, using it. You don't need us. We're happy to help in any way, but we want to give you the power to manage this. The second thing you'll see is a lot of canned reports that XTIVIA has provided for the GovCon 365 app. So instead of having to build custom reports, whether it's funding notification, labor analysis, utilization, etc., a great suite of canned reports, and I'll also touch on some of our Power BI views later. Your month-end processes, so allocation of indirect costs, everything right at your fingertips, easy to access. And then I've got my work queues, so information about timesheets, expense reports, PTO requests. As I scroll down, you'll see some of the Microsoft default dashboard views. So I'm going to focus on the services side, but like Mark mentioned, if you're a product reseller or a contract manufacturer, we've got modules to support all of those unique requirements. The My section, what you're provided with here is the ability for an end user to manage a list of data. In this case, here are the 4 most critical jobs that I manage. And then what I'm seeing on my dashboards is just details related to those jobs. So whether it's profitability or cost to budget, I'm just getting a high-level view. I can hover my mouse over it or drill into it to see the detail. So once I select one of those jobs, now it takes me into the job setup, and I'm seeing critical information. Instead of running a report, I can quickly see contract value, funded value, revenue recognized, etc. All of these with the drill down to detail. So in this case, my AR balance currently shows that this client on this project is fully paid up. When I drill into that amount, it takes me into all the detail that makes up that open ledger, right? In that case, there's nothing open, but I could drill into, say, my billings, and now it shows, here's what I invoiced the customer. So really being able to get to details and not having to search around to find the answers are at your fingertips. The second thing I want to touch on is, how we leverage the Office suite. So, every company out there is using Microsoft Office as the back office platform. And what this provides is, some standard capabilities that really help you to become more efficient and collaborate better. So I'm going to go to the customer list to talk about a couple of these areas. So let's go ahead and we'll pop into a list of customers. The first thing you see when you're on a customer list is you're going to see, data related to this customer in more of like an Excel fashion. This can also be personalized, everything from the columns that are visible to the freeze pane that's available. I can sort by any column or filter any column to just give specific results. Same concept also with drill down. When we talk about the Office suite, one of the critical components is with Excel, right? So any list, report, or ledger, I can open the data in Excel. On any list or ledger, I can edit the data in Excel. So when I hit edit in Excel, what it does, it launches an Excel form. And now within Excel, I can actually leverage a free add-in that allows me to make updates inside of Excel and publish it back. So that's one of the key differentiators. A lot of systems will allow you to send data to Excel, but when you do, Can you sort and filter like you normally do? Not always. And then you certainly don't have that ability to actually make changes in Excel and publish it back. And it's as simple as, I'll go to my credit limit column and talk about this. I can actually just go in, make an update in Excel. I'll do the mathematical calculation of increasing it by 10%, click publish, and now it writes it through the business logic and publishes it back into Business Central. So that's simple to make updates and publish it back, but it also has all the audit trail. So I want to make sure I know who made that update. I can see who made it, what did they change it from and to, and when did it happen. So, just these simple things that help people to become more efficient and effective in using the system. The next area, when I think about the Microsoft Office platform, is related to SharePoint, right? So a lot of companies, I always hear, I want to be more digital. I don't want to be paper-based organization. So I can attach documents into any of these master records by just taking something from my desktop, dragging and dropping it. And this could be any kind of document, not just Microsoft documents, also emails, right? So now I find a document I want to attach. In this case, I attach it to a customer record. I open it up, and now it's shared across the enterprise. So I don't need to make a copy of it or use any kind of attach function. It's just as simple as drag and drop. And that's what people like. They want simple. So now we've touched a little bit on how does it leverage Excel? How does it leverage SharePoint? I'll just talk a little bit about the Word integration. So the integration with Word, any of your forms, think of things like purchase order documents, sales order documents, sales invoice documents. You can actually send those forms off to Word, use mail merge to update, and actually be able to create your own custom forms. We can certainly do those kind of things for you, but Microsoft's always trying to figure out, how do we put the power in the end user's hands? There's going to always be things that are more sophisticated that maybe you need help, but a lot of those basic things, it's great to be able to do them yourself, right? So the last Office piece I'll just mention is emailing, right? So I can email documents out of the system, whether it's send an invoice to a customer, or I've got a purchase requisition. I want a customer to, or a vendor to quote something. We can actually send those directly out of the system, whether you want to schedule them or just send them as an attachment through a process. So some of the great capabilities are harnessing the power outside of ERP, but kind of on the fringe, which is what the Office suite is. The next thing we want to chat a little bit about, the Power Platform. So for folks that don't know, the Power Platform includes Power BI, which I'll give you a little tutorial of, Power Automate, and Power Apps. So for people that don't know, let me go ahead and I'm going to open up a vendor card to talk about Power Automate a little bit. So I'm going to open up this vendor card, and while I'm here, I talked about that fact that how we make government contracting easier is give you tools to manage things that you need to do on a regular basis that off-the-shelf software often doesn't provide. So one of those things, we're not going to touch on all of them, but on the vendor and subcontractor side, if you need to do small business reporting, we've got all of that tracking in the system, so I can identify each of these vendors. Are they small, large, foreknown, not-for-profit? All of your disadvantaged classifications at the click of a button, turning those in and being able to report back to the government as needed. But Power Automate, what Power Automate allows me to do is build workflows inside of Dynamics. And those workflow approvals can actually happen in email, right? So you might not need to even go into Business Central. Say every time we create a new vendor, we need to have that approved by somebody. And the approval could have some kind of logic built into it. Maybe if the vendor is of a certain type, Mike approves it, different vendors, Mark approves, or if the credit limit is such, maybe it goes to Dennis for approval, right? So you can control those approvals through Power Automate or standard approval capabilities inside of Business Central. But in addition to approval flow, Power Automate can actually create action-based approval. So the idea is, hey, when I approve that vendor, let's email the vendor and let them know you're now approved to do business with XTIVIA. And maybe there's an onboarding process with a link that now they can fill in some other data, right? And Power Apps could be a place to let them fill that data in so that they can then complete that onboarding process. So think about being, more digital driven, remove paper, and things like approvals, instead of it being emails or paper based, now it's digital, right? So these are areas that we're helping you to become more efficient and in general make government contracting easier. So now we've kind of touched on general stuff. The last general piece I'm going to cover is Power BI, which is the dashboard and reporting tool. And before I go to Power BI, I do want to mention that Power BI can be embedded in any of these forms. So whether it's on my home page or one of those list pages, I'm going to actually go directly into a Power BI web browser to talk about, sometimes you have users that they don't necessarily want to get access or get into Business Central. Maybe it's an executive and they want to look at things from their cell phone, or they want to be able to go to just a browser to look at data. So what we've done at XTIVIA in our GovCon 365 app, it's not just government contract capabilities. It's also the reports we talked about inside and business process, and also dashboards. So these are some of the pre-built dashboards. These come out of the box, day one when we install them. Once you have data, right? You need data for a dashboard to be powerful. But once you have data in there, now you get this rich analytics. And we've got a set of views that's project-based. We've got a set of views that's financial-based. And then we'll call it inventory, vendor, manufacturing-based, right? So we've got data that you can leverage across the stack. I'm going to just touch on a little bit of project data and show you a quick example, but also show you that underlying data set. So we not only built the views, but we also built some of these measures so that you don't need to define, hey, how do I define utilization, right? We've got some controls where you can decide, how is utilization calculated, but, utilization, profit, what is my backlog, right? These are all calculated measures that the system just is there at your fingertips. So this is what we call a portfolio view. The idea is, as a PM, or if you're a VP of a division, we can restrict your view so you just see your data. And now in this example, I'm seeing here are the customers I'm managing projects for. For each of these projects, what is the cumulative revenue to date? And how much did we budget for revenue? And then in the bottom, it's a P&L for each of those projects. So on a monthly basis, annual basis, but also inception to date. They call these tiles, and each of the tiles are interconnected. So if I choose a certain customer, the other sections are now going to auto filter and just show information related to that customer. If I wanted to know more details about a project, if I right click, we've also added drill through. So now if I wanted to understand the AR, I could select that. Project status. Let's first start with the burn down of hours. I'll show you some of these views, and these can also be personalized and added to. So the burn down of hours is just showing we've got budgeting and forecasting inside of Dynamics, and I can identify what do we actually think the amount of work we're going to have. And then as we use it, it's kind of showing over time how those hours are going to be used over the period of performance. So burn down of hours, the funding spent. Everybody's always trying to track, backlog, how much funding do we have left? If you have a contract that has that notification of funds clause, making sure that we notify the government appropriately based on the contract. Maybe it's at 60 days prior to when I hit 70%, notify the government, right? So this dashboard is going to give me visibility. The size of the bubble tells me how much funding, and as it moves to the right, that funding is being used over time. You can create an alert. So maybe when a certain project hits 50% of funding used, notify me or take me to this dashboard. We also have alerts inside of Business Central. The project status is the next level of detail, right? So if I want to see, I've got the portfolio, which is high level, But when I drill into it, I can go down to this level of detail, right? Showing me overall funding, funded backlog. And now my revenue compared to budget, instead of it cumulative, it's trended over time. And then I've got all my tasks and subtasks. If I pick one, it filters all of the areas, and now I'm seeing the next level of detail on my project P&L. So labor by labor category code or burden by pool. And then I'm still seeing my bottom line profit or loss, again, for that task. And in this case, monthly, annual, and inception to date. Other things that people find intriguing, planned utilization, right? So as a people business, you want to see, am I overworking people? Do we not have enough work? How do I make adjustments? And you can also identify from a visual perspective, color coding things so that it pops out to you, right? So instead of having to, look through paper, I can visually or get notified that something's happening. No matter how many reports you create, there's always going to be something unique for a company. And that's where we've also defined, that data mart and being able to build your own view. So this is what we call a blank canvas. And from here, I can actually go in and choose certain elements that I want to report on. So in this case, I could look at, for this job, let's look at specifics about maybe revenue, right? So I can choose any of the measures, and then I would decide what is the specific job measure, whether it be backlog, build, cost with provisional indirects, actual indirects, unposted hours, right? So you just choose the measure you want to report on, and now it's showing me revenue by project. If I wanted to trend that revenue, I would just shift this to a matrix view, and now it sets up an area for columns to be trended. And at that point, I could just say, let's trend this by month. And now I've got by month each of my projects and how much revenue we've generated. You can automatically set filters on this data. So in this case, let's take out all the ones that are zero. So I'll say everything greater than or greater than zero. We don't want to show any of the projects that haven't started yet. Here is that list. You could also add other data elements into here by just clicking into a blank space. And maybe I also want to see the customers and what is the backlog that we have by customer. And let's show that as a chart view. So now on a pretty quick basis, I'm able to create a view that's showing me at a high level funded backlog, projects, and what is the total revenue. And again, these are connected, right? So these are just some general things, but being able to put data into your hands helps you be more efficient and effective. All right. So like I mentioned, full presentations. We also have snippets online that you can view, but happy to connect to give you more details. I'm going to get a little bit into some of the project stuff where this automation is helping companies to be more efficient. And I'm going to open up a job card to just talk about some of those areas. So the first thing you're going to see is, I'm going to collapse my box to the right. And now when I look at this WBS, again, it's like an online view showing me, here are each of my tasks, period of performance, details about cost, so overall budget, actual costs incurred, what could be billed, what has been billed. I don't need to run a report. If I want to know the detail behind it, I just select it to drill into it. All the setups that are going to drive the billing rules, right? So we won't go through all these, but just know that this can help you to automate the billing side. Whether you have cost type work, firm fixed price, all of those are available to you. In details on the work breakdown structure, we can control who can see codes, right? So visibility of timesheets and expense reports, what users can see the data in the period of time they can see it for, also tracking funding by CLIN, Akron, and SLIN, right? So things that you might be doing offline, again, that same concept, we're bringing them into a system, making it easy for you to access that data. And then as it relates to If you've got T&M work, the system allows you to track all of your T&M rates in the application. If you've got cost type work, you can manage your indirect rates. I'm going to show you a little bit about the pools because, for people coming off of either non-industry products or products like QuickBooks, you're doing that offline. We help make it easier by giving you efficiency, automation, and accuracy. So, with T&M, we're providing those billing rates by effective date. So you don't need to worry about when you've got multi-year T&Ms. I don't need to worry about going back and updating my pricing. Set it and forget it. The system is going to know when those rate changes happen and automatically bill at the proper rate for you. I talked about alerts before inside of Power BI. We also have alerts inside of Business Central. So these alerts can be set at any level of the WBS, and I can compare either what we spent, which means the funding we've used, or what we've billed, which means I posted the invoice. And I can compare that to the funding, right? I talked about funding by Akron, CLIN, or SLIN. But I can track either the funding or we've got full budgeting and forecasting in there. So I can set alerts comparing spent to funding and also spent to budgeted amount, and then trigger an alert at different percentages, have these go out to PMs or task managers. We've also had clients that I want to send it to the government. Let the government know when I hit this percent, have the system notify it versus have, worrying about the PM to remember to do it. So all of these, once you set up the job properly, now the system is going to handle, kind of the heavy lifting for you. So we'll set up a project and then we'll capture all the time and expense, right? So timesheets can be done either from inside the application or a mobile device. All ends up in the same place. Once that time has been submitted, then it goes through an approval process, right? And in addition to having, timesheets defined, you could have weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly. I actually talked with a company a couple days ago that actually has still monthly timesheets, right? So it's configurable so it can meet those unique requirements that you have. But once that time gets submitted, we can do an automated alert also to, remind people to enter time. Then someone will come in and approve, right? So they'd, review. These are timesheets, expense reports, PTO, whatever it might be. They approve or reject time. And now once that time has been approved or rejected, now it's available for labor distribution. Again, this is an area that companies sometimes have to do things manually, right? Because depending on your labor distribution method, systems don't typically follow the government requirements there, right? Which is most often either standard rate or effective rate, but it's all built into Dynamics. So everything from processing your time, so getting all those approved timesheets in, to labor distribution. Once you've done that, another area, one of our clients has lots of subcontractors. I'm going to meet with them in a couple weeks because they are having their subs enter into Dynamics. And what they're doing also is we're working on the subcontractors. They want to roll out Dynamics also, but only have to enter it one time. So we're creating this methodology where if you're a prime and you have subs and you both are going to be using Dynamics, a way that we can easily interface that data so you can both use the same information and only enter your timesheet once. So really helping drive efficiencies in that subcontract management process, because all contractors, sometimes we compete, sometimes we partner. So we're going to make that subcontract process easier. And then as it relates to labor, we have integrations with about a dozen different payroll providers. So sample file formats, whether it be ADP, Paychex, Paylocity, Paycom, Payroll Networks, Kelly Payroll, right? So we've done a ton of them and we've built standard templates there. So another area where we don't want you to have to rekey data. Let us use technology to provide automation. So that labor process, taking you all the way through to being able to effectively meet government requirements. So those are baked in there. So, managing time in advance and making sure that the audit trails there, if people make changes to timesheets. Other self-service areas, things like expense reports. So if people are traveling based on JTR built into the system, if you want to manage PTO or purchase requisitions, again, all built in and using standard government concepts. So with purchase requisitions, if you need 3 approvals, you can build a requisition, submit it using workflow, and then generate purchase recs off of that. So send those out to your suppliers, capture the data in case there's ever any questions. So on the project side, we have all those elements of direct costs, labor, expenses, purchases, all built into Dynamics. Then your elements of indirects, this is where we have our cost pools or indirect rates set up. This can be as simple or complex as your business. So in my example, I've got fringe, overhead, as well as home office allocations and G&A. For each of these pools, you're just defining how the rate gets calculated. Once I calculate the rate, how the allocation is managed. So whether it's tiered allocations or, I'm just, in this case of overhead, allocations going out to projects at actual and provisional rate, and the system is managing those rates inside the system. So at any point, I can see what my actual rates are, the provisional that I'm using, also date-based, and then finally, if you've got cost type work, being able to produce that final rate invoice all out of the system. So the last thing I want to touch on is we've captured all the cost, and now, especially for growing companies, it's all about cash flow. So how do you get the invoices out rapidly? But when you're going to generate an invoice, you just run what we call the create invoice process. And you could either have one invoice for that whole job, or sometimes we have clients that have multiple invoices for one job. So just think about if you had one job with 20 tasks and every task is its own invoice, how tedious that could be. But what we can do is use this multi-select and say, hey, I want to invoice all the tasks. And then I say, okay. And then what it'll do is it'll generate all of these invoice proposals or worksheets. And this is where I can review it, make sure it's accurate. And then once I know that it's what I'd like, at that point, I can send it out to the customer. So the first thing I'd do is I would probably internally review it, make sure it looks right. So I'll go ahead and preview it. To save time, I won't talk about all the different formats that we have, but we've also got, the 1034 and 1035, the public voucher. So this one's a simple one, right? Just T&M, hours, rate, but also showing inception to date. Do you have any withholding? So, and then we've got information that you might need to provide, funding, how much funding is left. Again, just like I talked about before, you can print any of these things, but I can send them as an email, I can send them to Excel, PDF, etc. So, but once I review it, if I need it approved by somebody, I can just send out that approval request. So trying to do it all within the system. And then I'm not going to post it, but that's kind of the process I'd go through to quickly generate an invoice, approval process, and make sure that we get those things submitted out. I'm going to touch on one last thing because I can see we only got a couple minutes left. But the last thing I'm going to mention is I know that I looked at some of the folks on the webinar, and some of them are manufacturing companies. I just want to mention full inventory management with MRP, MPS, all baked into it. So when you look at the application, like Mark mentioned, you do have the ability to leverage as much or as little as you need. But, from a pricing perspective, Microsoft makes it simple, but ability to expand as you grow. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it back to you. So today was meant to give you a little insight into what is Dynamics 365 Business Central, what is the GovCon 365 app, and again, how we make government contracting easier, leverage Microsoft's amazing technology stack, streamlined interface, integration Power Platform and Office Suite, and then XTIVIA's GovCon 365 solution that's built into it. It automates the things that you need to run a government contracting business with people that understand what you do. So, Mike, I know we only have a couple minutes, and maybe we'll just, if you need to drop off, you can, but let's just take a few questions. And if you don't stick around, we'll email those questions out. So the Q&A is open. I already see there's a bunch in there, but we'll just stick around for a few extra minutes. And Mike, I'll let you kind of control the questions and let us know which ones you want to cover.
Absolutely. Great job, Paul. Yeah, and we did have a nice flow of questions. I'd say 44 after the hour, we can go over a little bit, so we can probably have time for 3 or 4 questions.
Okay.
First one I spot, our business is a blend of commercial and federal work. Could this be a good solution for us? I can just take that one myself.
Okay.
Yes, the short answer is yes, absolutely. So Microsoft Business Central Dynamics is a very flexible tool. So whether you have concern about the compliance requirements with the federal work, but you also need that capability and that flexibility for also doing commercial work, it can absolutely work for you. In fact, a large pool of our existing client base, that is their business model, right? They have both federal and commercial work. So whether you're a professional services company, a contract manufacturer, or an international organization, the system in place has the capability to support all of those various business models. Absolutely. So, Paul, I know you touched on this a little bit in the demo, but the question came in, is there an approval process for these types of changes? So maybe you could just talk a little bit about the flexibility and capabilities around approvals and Dynamics a bit more.
Yeah. So, any kind of changes that get made. So the first thing, I'm not sure of the context to the question.
Was when you added the 10% into the credit limit.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can have approvals built into it, right? Where somebody they can't update that without an approval, right? So that workflow engine can be leveraged to make sure that, before it's actually available, somebody needs to approve it, right? So somebody could make the change, and basically it would put that customer on, you could either put the customer on hold until it's approved, or that change doesn't go through until it's approved. So there is flexibility in that approval process using Power Automate.
Okay, great. So the same individual, I think, asked like 3 questions here, so I'll just package them all together. Paul, this one will probably be for you. Is Business Central still program customizable like NAV 2017? Does BC have a manual, and would this still work on a physical or with a physical server? So
okay, all right. So somebody's got some experience. Most people don't even know it was called NAV back in the day, and for people that are been using this a really long time, might even remember the word Navision. But in terms of can you enhance it? Yes, you still can, right? So it's done differently because it's a native cloud app. I'll answer these kind of things together. It's a native cloud app. We can enhance it, but how it's enhanced now is through an extension. And because it's done through an extension, it makes it easier to upgrade. So whether I should say update versus upgrade. And whether you're in the cloud or on-prem, right? So it still offers cloud or on-prem. We still use those client extensions because if you're in the cloud, you're automatically updated. And we need an extension concept to make it simple to update. If you're on a physical server, we still use it, but you control the update when it happens. And then, in terms of the manual, 2 things on that. Microsoft's got online manual, and then XTIVIA has both online as well as videos on the GovCon 365 app.
Awesome. Let's take one or 2 more if you guys are cool with it. Next one was, so we have about 125 employees and are a services business. Are we a good fit? And how does your solution scale for growth? So Mark, maybe you
I'll
want to
take it. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. No, that's a good question. So, and we get it quite often. So I would say that, 125 employees is a nice sweet spot for the application here. I mean, our clients, are, they can be in the 60 to 70 up to 200 employees. Is really the sweet spot in the companies that we're working with. I say that, but I it's got a SQL database background, so it's pretty, it can scale very large, right? We can have a lot of clients, and I guess as I'm saying this, I know we have some publicly traded companies as well as I remember a few years back, we migrated a cost point client off of cost point to this. I think they were somewhere in the 4,000 to 5,000 employee range. So
Yeah. So we've
those are
done a
some of the
bunch.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark. No, I was going to say
Yeah.
we've done a bunch of cost point migrations, and I think the largest client at the time had over 5,000 employees. So.
Cool. All right, let's do one more. So can the system support our business, which is a blend of engineering services work and contract-based manufacturing? So I know, Paul, you were trying to get into the manufacturing side a little bit towards the end. So
Yeah. So I'll cover that, and then there's one last question, and then we'll shut it down at that point. But in terms of businesses that are hybrid, it can certainly support it. The thing that we do that's different than all of our competitors, and I want to talk specifically about manufacturing, is that we don't need to, things can be done, engineering services are done on our projects. If you do contract-based manufacturing, we also do project-based or contract-based manufacturing. So you can handle cost-type work that maybe is prototype-driven or similar business model, and they can both live together. But sometimes we have clients that they end up getting into long-run manufacturing where they don't want to have a project, or they're reselling products and they don't want to have a project. That's where that flexibility comes in. And that's where experience comes in, which is we don't want to add complexity because of limitations of the system. That's why we want to understand your business and deliver a solution that helps you to be more efficient and doesn't handcuff you, but gives you all the tools to make sure you're compliant in every fashion. And I'm going to close it out with one question that just came in, and it's around multi-company, and it's one near and dear to my heart because when I first started using this system, I worked for a global card manufacturer. We were doing smart cards for the federal government before smart cards were cool, and we had 5 operating companies in the U.S. And that's one of the advantages of this system is very sophisticated multi-company capabilities, also multinational. So if you have multiple operating companies, or sometimes we have companies that have ITAR requirements because they're doing business with foreign governments, all of that built into the system. So one, I want to thank Mike and Mark for a great job. Thank you to everybody for attending. I see a lot of people have stuck around, and I know we went over a little bit. We try to make sure we fit it in the time slot, but there's so much to see, and we're so passionate and excited about it. Mark and Mike will both follow up. We'd love to hear more from everybody on the call, and happy to provide any personalized presentation for you. But have a fantastic day, and thank you for considering XTIVIA and GovCon 365.
Great job, guys. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Like you said, we said this has been recorded, so once it's all downloaded and all that stuff, we'll get it sent out to everybody that attended. You see all of our contact information there. So if this is something that really interests you, we'd love to speak with you further. So don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, you'll either hear from Mark or myself here in the near future, and we'd love to speak with you guys further. So thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.